Today we're looking at the consequence of divorce. So we covered divorce last session, and the session before that was on marriage. So this session we're looking at what is the effect of divorce on different family members. So for the parents, children, and extended family. So firstly, I just want you to think for yourself about that statement that's in the bubble. Divorce is always a bad thing. Do you think this is true? Do you agree with this statement? And try and justify why or why not. So firstly, thinking about consequences for the husband and wife who perhaps have had a divorce. Okay, so we've got a sociologist, Paul Bohannon, and he describes the consequences of divorce for husbands and wives, and he puts it under 6 headings. The first one is the emotional effect of divorce. So a partner could experience a sense of grief because they've lost their partner, or loneliness because they have relied on their partner for so long. It could be the legal aspect of divorce. So court visits, particularly in relation to custody of children, separating assets like your house, your car, all the things that you've jointly owned over the years. The economic aspect of divorce, so having less money because obviously you're now having to live alone rather than pooling your money together. Co-parenting, so sharing parental responsibility. This might be an area of contention for the husband and wife who gets to see the children the most. How do you divide up parenting when you're not living together anymore? Community, so changes to the community for one member of the partnership. So it might be that friends who were perhaps friends with both of you now are only friends with one person, or they might still remain friends with both partners, and the partners have to decide who gets to see their friends when and where. And the psychological effects of getting divorced. Obviously, it's a very stressful life event. It can add stress and pressure. It can affect somebody's work as well, and other aspects of their life because of the emotional stress that they're under. So all of these appear at the moment to be quite negative effects. So this is a sort of exam question that you might face. Explain 2 negative consequences of divorce in the family. So one negative consequence is, go back to this slide, pick one of the effects. So you might say, one negative consequence of divorce is the legal aspect relating to divorce. This is a negative. This is negative for the family because, and then I would explain why the experience of going to court might be negative. So it might be that it takes up lots of time. It might be that it's very stressful. Then you need to give a second negative consequence. So I might say a second negative consequence is the economic aspect of divorce. This is a negative for the family because it means that they might not be able to afford, the house that they currently live in. They might have to move away. They might not be able to afford holidays and relaxation activities. So with the second part, I think this is the part that most people are losing marks on. They're able to give, the statement or the point, but the explanation of our points is not as detailed as it needs to be. So it's what we call a chain of reasoning. You need to say why it's negative. And you might be thinking, well, obviously it's negative if you've got less money, or obviously it's negative if you're stressed, but you have to explain to the examiner why, so that they understand, or so that they know that you understand. Okay, so we looked at those negative aspects, but actually sometimes divorce can have positive outcomes for parents, children, and wider family. So you can probably, from your own knowledge, think of what the positive outcomes of divorce might be. I've put there the wider family one because that one might be a little bit more difficult. So I've said that a positive outcome of divorce for the wider family is that grandparents may get to see their children more because they're needed to help look after the children. Obviously, in a divorce, you end up then with 2 single parents. If the mum is a single parent and is mostly looking after the children, she might ask the grandparents or aunties and uncles to help look after them. And that's quite positive because they get to see their wider family more and have more role models in their life. There's a clip there at the bottom. I'll put the link in the comments below. Have a look at that if you're not sure why it might be positive for parents and children, but I'm sure you can think of those by yourself. So answer this question. So again, it's an exam style question. Explain one reason why divorce may be beneficial for children. So one reason why it may be beneficial is this is a good thing because. So your point is very succinct. You're giving a statement as to why it might be beneficial, but then the second part is the explanation of why that is a good thing. Okay, so Rodgers and Pryor did a study called Divorce and Separation. Their study was a literature review. They reviewed 200 studies that had already been done on this topic, and they wanted to find out what the effect of divorce was on children, and they mostly focused on the negative aspects. They found that children of separated families have a higher probability of the following. So being in poverty or poor housing, being poorer when they're adults, they're more likely to have behavioural problems and perform less well in school. They're more likely to leave school or home when they're young. They're more likely to become sexually active, pregnant, or a parent at early age. They're more likely to experience depressive symptoms and experiment with smoking or drinking and drug use. All of these things obviously are quite negative, and it's really important to note here that they're not saying that if you come from a divorced family or a separated family, that you are definitely going to go away, get pregnant, perform badly in school, and have behavioural problems. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that children from those families are simply more likely to experience these things. So answer these questions based on Rodgers and Pryor's study. So what is a benefit of using a longitudinal study? So they obviously reviewed these 200 studies. They were, it was done over a long period of time. What's a good thing about using a longitudinal study to look at the impact of divorce on children? Remember that they looked at the impact when they became adolescents to adulthood. So why is a longitudinal study needed for that? And number 2, explain one practical problem of using longitudinal studies to find out the impact of divorce on children. So think about, would people be likely to drop out of the study? Remember, longitudinal, if it's done over a long period of time, the participant has to consent to be part of the study for the entire duration of the study. So they might drop out. Remember TRAMP, our acronym for practical issues: time, resources, access, money, and personality of the researcher. Do any of those link to this question? There's a challenge task there. Think about those ethical issues. So remember, the ethical issues are DRIP. If you can't remember what DRIP is, go back to your notes and see if you can think about if any of those relate to Rodgers and Pryor's study. Okay, linking divorce to sociological theory. So we've looked at functionalism, feminism, and Marxism before. Read the statements and decide, does it relate to the functionalist, feminist, or Marxist view? Now, it's important to note here that none of these theories have a coherent and sort of agreed consensus on what they think about divorce. So it does make this a little bit more difficult. I've done the first one for you. Divorce affects working class families the most. So that's clearly linked to Marxism, because we know that Marxists look at class differences in education and families and crime and everything. Divorce is beneficial for women, number 2. Remember, functionalists look at society as a whole. Feminists are looking at how things affect men and women. So have a go at trying to figure out which of these statements links to which theory. There is an extension as well. If you have time, go onto this sociology crash course video. It's a little bit more detailed than you need to know, but it's really good for stretching yourself and learning a little bit more in depth about this topic. That's everything. So please send over your work by Friday, and also please look out for the email regarding the drop-in session that's going to take place week A on Thursday between 11 and 12. I'll be there to answer any of your questions that you have about the work that we've covered so far. Take care. Bye.